योऽन्तः प्रविश्य मम वाचमिमां प्रसुप्तां सञ्जीवयत्यखिलशक्तिधरः स्वधाम्ना अन्यां च हस्तचरणश्रवणत्वगादीन् प्राणान्नमो भगवते पुरुषाय तुभ्यम्। आचार्य पवनोऽस्माकम् आचार्याणि च भारती देवो नारायण शीशः देवी मंगला देवता. So good evening to all of you joining on the Madhvanava Mahotsava that is being celebrated all over the world since last Sunday. And yesterday we had the opportunity to hear about the life and works of Sri Madhvacharya. Before that, we had the opportunity to listen to Dr. Vyasankere Prabhanjanacharya on the overview of Madhvacharya's life and his philosophy. With that, today we are going to look at something which is a very rare topic, which is about what are the building blocks of Madhva philosophy. So when we say anything is a form of philosophy, we never get into the details, or we rarely get into the details of what constitutes Madhva philosophy. So if anyone were to ask us, what is Madhva philosophy all about? We probably come up with some very broad explanations. But we've been so fortunate that the manner in which Sri Madhvacharya and his illustrious lineage has explained what Madhva philosophy is all about is not only just sharp and pithy, but something that we can all make an honest attempt to understand. So it is with that objective that we are starting today's session, which is on what is the cornerstone of Madhva philosophy. So when you look at the topic of philosophy, it deals with three things essentially. It talks about the God, it talks about the soul or me, and it talks about the world or the Jagat. So it is about Brahman or the Parabrahma and the nature of Brahman. It talks about the Jiva or the soul, and it talks about world or the Jagat. So this is the three broad topics that philosophy actually addresses. And as a corollary to that, anything that we call philosophy should address these three things, as well as the interrelationship that exists between these three aspects or these three entities. So let's keep this broad frame in our mind when we want to say we want to understand creation or what is the topic on philosophy. So it is God, it is the soul, and it is the Jagat. So with that, let us first look into a wonderful shloka which has been given by Sri Vyasaraja. So he was asked once, what is Madhva Shastra all about? Can you tell us that in a pithy manner? And here is what he said. This has 9 different tenets or aspects, and we will look at each tenet as we go along. But here is a summary of that. It is Sriman Madhvamate Harit Parataraha Satyam Jagat Tattvato Bhinna Jivagana Hare Anucharaha Nichocha Bhavangataha Muktihi Naija Sukhanu Bhutihi Amala Bhaktishta Tat Sadhanam Shakshadi Kritayam Pramanam Akhilam Nayika Vedyo Harihi. So in one single shloka, he has actually captured the essence of Madhva philosophy. Now, this is a unique achievement by itself, because to look at a vast sea of knowledge and to be able to summarize this in such a pithy manner shows how succinct the philosophy itself is, how direct the philosophy it is. So we all belong to a generation which is very comfortable when we see things in bullet forms. We are not very comfortable with long text, but bullet forms, yes, people get it very easily. So I think the first attempt to explain a philosophy in bullet form came from Sri Vyasaraja. So this tenet, as it has been underlined, has got 9 aspects to it, and we will look at each one of them. So let us dive into the first topic. So this is not a tenet, it's an introduction to Sriman Madhvamatehe. So what is Sriman Madhvamata? So why do we call it Mata? Let us start from that. A Mata, sometimes when we speak in Kannada, we ask people, what is Nimma Mata Yenu? Or we ask in Hindi, Aapka Mat kya hai? So mat is treated more as an opinion. Here, it's not an opinion, but a form of philosophy. So mata means a form of philosophy. It is not an opinion. Because why is this? What's the difference? The difference is this: that an opinion is based on individual's thinking. It is based on individual thoughts and individual conceptions, which can evolve over a period of time. All of us will agree. Our opinion on several things keeps on changing all the time. Imagine philosophy, which is the guiding light of our life, the north star of our life, keeps on changing its direction. Do we have the north star appearing in the west someday? It never happens. So if we want something that we should be very, very sure of, not dogmatically, but through analysis, that is amata. Madhvamata. Why do we call it Madhvamata? This is Madhvamata primarily because it is Madhavana Mata or Mata of Madhava, that is Lord Vishnu himself. And that has been open and propagated in the current generation by Sri Madhvacharya. So Madhvacharya never claims, and nowhere is it said this way, that he invented any of these topics. It is based on something which already existed, which has got amplified in the current form, and that is what we know as Madhva philosophy. And that's the biggest strength of Madhva philosophy, that it does not propagate something which has come to somebody's brainchild that very moment. No, for everything that Madhva Mata says, there is a proof which is quoted, and that's a very important aspect, because today in this world there is absolutely no dearth of philosophers. Everybody comes up with their own, interpretation, and everybody's interpretation, everybody's opinion, we can definitely be heard, but we can't listen to everybody. There's a difference between hearing and listening. So that is Madhvamate. Then why do we call it Shriman? Shriman, as we all know, means somebody who's wealthy. So why do we call Madhvamate as Shriman? Something which is wealthy, because it has got a wealth of knowledge. Shriman, as we know, is someone we address someone with out of respect, because that person has wealth. Now, what is the wealth we are talking about? The meaning of Shriman is someone who's got an absolute control over his organs or his senses, Indriya. So he's got the complete control on his Indriyas. So what is the benefit? Why do we call him Shriman? What more do you want? Because if you can have a complete control of your senses and guide them in the direction that you want to, and direct, which is the right direction, you can conquer anything in the world. And that's the message uh, of of uh, of the Bhagavad Gita. So that is why we call it Shriman Madhvamatehe. And of course, why do we say this? Because another reason for Shriman Madhvamatehe being used here is the fact that it was propagated by Madhvacharya 800 years ago. And to this day, the philosophy exists, thrives, and is in fact growing in size. The very fact that all of you are sitting in the US and other parts of the world and listening to this on this particular day itself is a strong testimony of how Madhvamata exists in all our hearts. So that's why we call it Sriman Madhvamata. We can turn around and ask, aren't lots of other schools of philosophy also existing? So why do we think so highly about Madhvamata? The big difference between Madhvamata and other matas is the fact that it is absolutely unadulterated, unabridged, even to this day. For 800 years, for 800 years, you will this is something that is continuing without any contradiction, unlike other forms of philosophy which got disputed at that very moment. It was disputed in the lifetime of the philosophers itself. But it starts with Madhvacharya, then his illustrious four gurus and the Ashtamatadipatis. Then it came to people like Jaitirtha, Sri Trivikrama Panditacharya, Sri Vyasaraja, Sri Brahmanya Tirtha, Sri Raja, Vijayendra, Vadyarajaru, Raghottamaru, and Raghavendra Swamiji. And to this day, there is not a letter that we find to be inconsistent with the basic tenets of this philosophy. So, what we're going to be seeing here is something which is very, very crucial today, because this is something which we need to be to be understanding in entirety. So, it is the most recent of the philosophies. Yesterday we saw the chronology of all the different schools of philosophy. Madhva philosophy is right in the center, and the recent one. So, unique perspectives, and it's overcoming past objections because it's unique. It has overcome a lot of. It's the latest. It has overcome a lot of objections which were raised on the topic of philosophy. So there were many forms of philosophy, and they all had a counter. And Madhva philosophy was able to address all these issues at that point in time, and that continued all through. It has got a unique form of epistemology. We will see that later in the topic of Hekshadikritayam Pramana. Epistemology is a school of proof. So how do you prove something, whether that is right or not, is the gamut of the topic of epistemology. And it's a science of experience. Nacha anubhava virodhe agamasya pramanya. So anything that when you hear and read about other philosophy, you should be able to experience it after some contemplation. So when you read about any topic, you should be able to relate to it and say, does it fall into my area of experience, and evaluate it. So this is the real highlight, if I may say, where Madhvacharya says that your Sakshi is the ultimate proof, and we'll see that as we go along. It has got countrywide inspiration from Sri Madhvacharya. Wherever he went, he created an influence of Vaishnavism, an influence of the Bhakti Pantha. Yes, sure, there was Bhakti, the concept of Bhakti which existed before him. But after he came in, you can see that throughout the country, throughout all parts of India, there were philosophers who were inspired by him and have taken up the topic of Vaishnavism and propagated that in their own manners. Now, all of that might not be entirely consistent with Madhvamata's tenets, but the fact is the Vaishnavism and the concept of Bhakti towards Lord Vishnu is something that we see all the way from Badrinath in the Himalayas, all the way up to Kanyakumari in the south. So that is, and very importantly, it is a samanvaya of all scriptures, the Vedas and the Puranas. So what is samanvaya? It is an absolute correlation and corroboration of the different philosophy, the different sacred texts with Madhvamata. So Madhvamata is absolutely consistent with every form or every scripture that we know of, whether it is the Vedas or the Upanishads or the Mahabharata or the other Puranas or any other authentic text. It is absolutely consistent. So that is why we say Madhva Matave Matavu Sakala Shruti Sammatavu. That means all the Vedas absolutely are consistent with Madhva Mata. Madhva Mata is absolutely consistent with the authentic text. Now, again, this is a rarity because that is not the case with every form of philosophy. There are aberrations, there are inconsistencies, and there are doubts that have always been raised about the consistency of the other matas. So, with that, we will get into the first tenet of the Madhva philosophy, probably the most important aspect of Madhva philosophy, which is Srimad Madhvamatehe Hari Parataraha. Harihi is Parataraha. So, what does it mean? It means Hari, Lord Narayana, is separate, he is unique, he is supreme. So when we say separate, what does it mean? It means if you have to cut the whole world into two parts, what would they be? It will be Hari on one side and the rest of the world on the other side. Why do we say this? Why do we have to cut the world? The thing is, it's a way of classification. And when you classify the world, it is on one aspect, which is Swatantriya. That means independence in the absolute sense. So that is why it is called Harihi Parataraha. So why Hari and why not other gods? The Vedas, the Upanishads, Mahabharata, all of them unequivocally say that the concept of supremacy exists only with Hari. and he is Parataraha. So we all know, even people who know Kannada or any other Indian language, para means different. Why is it called Parataraha? We should have probably said Paraha. But why are we saying Parataraha? Paraha means different. Parataraha means totally different. There is a sense of absolutism when we are talking about the concept of Hari. Now, why is this important? Why not just say that, yeah, maybe he is slightly better than the others? That is where the biggest cornerstone of Madhva philosophy exists, where we are saying Harihi is Parataraha. That means someone who is completely different from the others and who has nothing in common with the rest of the world. The whole of the universe put together cannot equal Sri Hari's energy, the power, and the knowledge that he has. So that is why we call it Hari Parataraha. So Madhva philosophy has got many texts. We call it the Sarvamoola Granthas. There are 37 texts. And the most basic and the first text that one studies typically is Tattva Sankhyanam. All of us will be really surprised to know that this entire so-called Sarvamoola text, and the moment we say Grantha, we think about leather-bound 2000-page books. This entire Grantha is 11 shlokas. So if you print it on an A4 size sheet of paper, it actually occupies about 60% of an A4 size paper. That is, can you believe that itself, 11 shlokas itself make up for Tattva Sankhyanam. So in this, the first shloka, it is Swatantram Aswatantrancha. He starts the whole concept of Madhva philosophy with Sri Hari being Swatantra or Vishnu being Swatantra and the rest of the world being Aswatantra. So Lord Vishnu is Swatantra, he is completely independent, he is omniscient, he is omnipotent, and that is why he is Parataraha. Lakshmi, goddess Lakshmi is Para. She is also different from the rest of the souls. But Lord Vishnu is Parataraha. That means someone who is more superior to even goddess Lakshmi. So therefore, it is Hari Parataraha. Now, the other very inspiring shloka which appears in the Vamana Purana is that Sri Hari is the only source of energy. So why not have so many sources of energy? The fact is every source of energy has to have another source of energy. And that if you can, and that source of energy in turn has another source of energy. So if all these sources of energy have to converge at some stage, and that convergence and that body of convergence is Sri Hari. So that's a unique definition of Lord Hari, Narayana himself, where he says, when we say that it is the culmination or the ultimate abode of all the strength that exists in the world. And this is something that the modern day physics has completely agreed. Those of you familiar with Einsteinian physics would agree with this, that the fact that there can be only one single source of energy, which then manifests in many ways. And you can't believe the words of Albert Einstein and the shloka correspond so well. Tatra tatra sthito Vishnu tattat shakti prabodayam ekameva mahashakti kurute sarva manjasa. That means the Vishnu is present in different ways and energizes the universe in many different ways. But ekameva mahashakti kurute sarva manjasa. There's one source of energy which actually is energizing all the other forms of energy, right? So if you want to think about it this way, let us say look at your house. There's one electric wire which actually comes inside the house, but the energy through that one source is actually getting manifested in so many different forms. Same electricity heats the water, the same electricity freezes something in the fridge, the same thing heats up something in a micro oven, the same electricity powers your laptop and your phones on which you probably are watching this program. So it's one source of energy which is manifesting in this different ways. That is the cornerstone of Hari Parataraha. So the God is Hari Parataraha because He is a single source of energy. And he's complete. It's very, very important to know this. He's complete. When we look at the concept, we all have been growing up with the notion that, Lord Brahma creates the world, the universe, Vishnu then, protects it, and Shiva destroys it or annihilates it. So they have very clear people and they seem to be peers. They are doing something of equal importance. The fact is, the Shastra, the Puranas are very clear, saying that it is Vishnu who does all these three things. If you have to create something, then that person who's creating also has to be protected. If somebody has to annihilate something, that person also has to be protected. The concept of protection, therefore, is very, very central. And Lord Vishnu in the form of Brahma, Lord Vishnu in the form of Shiva creates, protects, as well as annihilates the world. So that is Harihi Paratara. Then the other thing, so what is when we say complete, what does it mean? It means Purnamada, Purnamidam, Purnat, Purnamuchyate, Purnasya Purnamadaya, Purnameva Avishishyate. That means he is complete in every respect. He's not dependent on anybody else to actually to deliver all the aspects of this universe. He is the single source and he propagates it over and over again. So deliberately, I have used some of the Devarnamas. The purpose I use this in some incidents is that I would like to bring out the fact that the Devarnamas are actually the Kannada Sarvamulas. So they have brought out these aspects so beautifully in their own way as far as Madhva philosophy is concerned in the Kannada form. So it is Harihi Parataraha. So here it says Madhva Matave Matavu Sakala Shruti Sammatavu. Purandaradasa says. Why are we saying this? Because Madhva Matave Matavu. It is the only form of philosophy because it is consistent with all the Shrutis. Then it also says Shripati Purandara Vithalane Paranendu Hodi Nagari Mile Kaya. There's a very famous Devarnama which talked about Hodi Nagari Mile Kaya. That means take and beat the band and strike it. That means it's a way of saying announce it with all the glamour and all the grandeur that Shripati Purandara Vithalane Paranendu. Again the word para is being used. So Shri Harihi Parataraha. So that is the first tenet of Madhvamata. The second tenet is Satyam Jagat. Here we are saying Satyam Jagat. That means the universe around us is real. No, we always felt it was real. Where is the question? The point is, it is believed by many forms of philosophy that this world is actually illusionary. It doesn't exist. We find the world this way because we have ajnana or we do not have knowledge. Once the curtain of lack of knowledge just disappears, then the world becomes, it's very clear to us that this world doesn't exist. This is what is called Mayavada or Mithyatva. That means the world is a myth, it doesn't exist. However, Madhva philosophy does not accept this. The world, Madhvacharya says, is which is absolutely real. It may not be permanent. It may be changing. It may be evolving, but that is different from something not being there. So the world around us is not an illusion. It is a real world. Now look at our own experiences. Has our experience ever said that the world around us, which we are touching, we are feeling, we are seeing, we are perceiving it in every single way, is not real? No. So it is something which does not go with our own experiences. So therefore, the Jagat is Satyam. Now this world was created by God. So if his creation is false, then the creator also probably is false or he's pretending to have created a world. So isn't it saying that the all-powerful Brahman who actually created this great world and the universe around us is false or is a fake, right? The moment you look at a great painting, what's the first thing you say? Great painting. Who is the painter? So the painting is fake. Whom will you give credit to? To a fake painter. So therefore, the Jagat, the universe around us, cannot be illusionary. It is something which is real. And why would an illusionary world exist? So let us say, for example, you look at something, it's a very common example. You look at a rope. You're walking on the street, a little dimly lit maybe, and there's a rope which has fallen on the somebody just dropped a rope, short rope, say a rope of some 4 feet. The moment you look at it, you say, "Oh my God, is it a snake?" And then you go closer, or you just try to be careful and see what happens. Slowly you realize, "Oh my God, this is not a snake; it is a rope." So therefore, how did this happen? When you look at the rope and say it's a snake, what does it mean? You have seen a snake somewhere in the world for real. At least the picture was real, right? You've been to a zoo, or maybe you've seen it in a movie, or so on. So that was real. And now you are imagining this rope to be a snake. So that snake is not this rope. How did you come to know that this is the, how? Why did you get a feeling that this is a snake? This is a snake. You thought this is a snake because you've seen a snake earlier, right? So if this world is illusionary and yet we are able to see all of this, that means we should have seen a world like this somewhere else, which is which means that this world is not real, but there's another world which is real. And to prove that world is not real, you must have seen another world. So instead of accepting an infinite set of worlds, it is better to accept the world which we all know and see and feel to be real. That is Satyam Jagat. And if the world itself was illusionary, what is the motivation for all of us to do any sadhana or to do anything? You can look at your child and look at why should I bring you up? The world is illusion. You are also an illusion. I am also an illusion. The college that you're aspiring to go, an Ivy League school, is an illusion, and so on and so forth. The child is crying for want of food. You have to tell the child, this hunger itself is illusion. If I give you food, that is also illusion. You are an illusion, I am an illusion, the whole world is a, forget it, let's not do anything. The motivation comes when you realize the world is real. Whatever you're doing counts in the future. So therefore, that is the tenet of Satyam Jagat. The third one is Tattvato Bhinnaha. That means there are different types of entities in the world, and you should be able to classify this. This is a very common thing that we do in science. The moment you get into biology and say how many plants are there, dicotyledons, monocotyledons, right? How many types of bones exist? There is a classification. How many types of nerves? Why do we classify? Because we want to understand each of them separately, because there are characteristics that define them. So in this world too, there are different entities. Mainly, as I said, God, there is a soul, and there is a Jagat. So there are 5 types of differences. There is difference between God and the soul. There is difference between God and and the world. There is difference between the soul and the world, and there is difference between the souls themselves, and there is difference between the different the aspects of the world itself. So Jagat has got many entities. There are different types of souls, but there is only one Brahma. So these constitute the 5 differences that I just mentioned. Those are called Panchabheda. So classification actually helps us to understand, as I said, the differences, which is essential to scientific inquiry. Only when you are able to classify things will you get into the inquiry of each one of them. So therefore, the first step towards that is acknowledging that tattvas are different. And there is a classification, there is a clear demarcation in terms of their characteristics. So these bhinnas, or the difference in entities, was not created by Madhvacharya. He just brought out that yes, there are different entities, and we have to sort of differentiate it. And of course, the Harikatamritas are several places, but one place is very clear is Pancha Bhedatmaka Prapanchavu. That means the world around us has got these five entities. So you can also look at other Devarnamas where this particular aspect has been talked about. That is the third tenet, which is the world has got several entities, and those entities differ from each other. So, what is the fourth entity? So, we talked about difference among souls. So, Jiva Ganaha, Hare Ranucharaha. Jiva Ganaha is a plural. So, it is that means the Jiva Ganaha itself, there exists different types of souls, and that are all, irrespective of who they are all Hare Ranucharaha. That means they are all servants of God. So when we say servant, what does it mean? They are completely dependent on Sri Hare Anucharaha. They are all completely dependent on the fact that Sri Hari is supreme. And everything that they get is something that is, in some way is connected to, they get it from Sri Hari. Whether it is knowledge, it's energy, whatever. All of that comes from Sri Hari. So Jiva Ganaha are different, and Hare Ranucharaha is, they are all servants of God. So what does it show? It shows a sense of absolute dependence. It is not dependence just in a superficial way. No, we say, oh my God, my country is independent. Yes, we are independent because we have our own government. But the country itself does not have absolute independence. On many on many policies, it is dependent on several other countries, several other institutions for its survival. So therefore, it is not independence in the absolute sense. Sri Hari is completely independent. As we saw, Hari Paratara, the souls are completely dependent on it. So therefore, that explains the beautiful relationship that of someone who is our guru, who is our mother, father, everything. Guru bhumshvacha karma nijam niyatam haripada vinamradiya satatam harireva paro harireva guruhu harireva jagat pitrumatragati. So that clears the charter for us, which is perform your duties and then offer it on the feet of Shiva Narayana, and because you're completely dependent on him, and it is with his grace that you can achieve salvation and everything else in this world. So this is not something which is an isolated sentence made by Madhvacharya, it is something which exists in all the Shastras, right? So we heard that shloka from Sri Prabhanjanacharya, Shunman, Sprishan, Pralapan, everything the Bhagavad Gita says, or Shri Krishna says in the Bhagavad Gita, for everything the jivas are dependent on him, right? And the famous shloka in Mahabharata Tatparya, which says, Naham karta hari karta, tat puja karma chati, tathapi matkrita puja, tat prasadena nanyata, tad bhaktis tat phalam mahyam, tat prasadat punah punah, karmanyaso haravevam Vishnoho Tripti Karasana. Beautiful shloka. I think we should all learn it by heart. It says, I am not the Karta. It's Hari who is Karta. I don't do anything. Madabeko, madilla vinabeko. Because we are saying Naham Karta, Hari Karta. Hari is doing everything. I'm just an instrument. Right? Suppose somebody comes and, let us say, has sent you some medicines from some other country in a courier, and the courier service person comes and gives it to you. What do you say? You say thank you, but immediately you call the people who sent it and say, I don't know how much I can thank you, because the real person who did everything, the core job, is Hari, and the person who came in here in this case is just a courier service. So we are all vehicles for God to actually action whatever He wants. Again, He doesn't need us; we need Him. So we may say, oh, maybe he's also dependent. Ultimately, the medicine, the person who sent the medicine, is dependent on the courier guy to deliver it to you. But this is not such a relationship. Even the courier guy gets his energy from Sri Hari. That's a big difference. So without Hari, we are nobody, and we are all Hare Anucharaha. So the next topic is Nichocha Bhavangata. So when we said souls, he said there exists a difference of souls. All the souls, irrespective of who they are, from Chaturbukha Brahma all the way down to all of us and to the last virus and germ and bacteria, everybody is completely dependent on God. But within that, there exists a hierarchy. This is the concept of Taratamya. That means there is hierarchy. So if you look at the concept of hierarchy, you don't have to go to the Shastras. You can see the concept of hierarchy all around you. There is hierarchy everywhere. You go to an institution, an education institution, who's the principal? The principal is different. The vice principal is different. The teachers are different. The students are different. The support staff is different. The bus driver who takes the children to the school is different. They all are different. There is a hierarchy which is there. You go to an organization, it is the CEO who runs the organization. There is there's a board of directors who are above the CEO, and then there are the shareholders. There are the executives of the company, and within the under each executive, you've got a hierarchy of people. Why is this important? If there was no hierarchy, will the organization work properly? Will you be able to even cook a dish properly if there's no hierarchy? Because there is clear command, there is a clear form of communication which is always happening with us. And therefore, the chain of command never should get broken. That is why there is a Nichocha Bhavangataha. So Nichocha, that means Nicha Ucha, that means there is a hierarchy. Everybody has a place in this world as per that hierarchy. So there is a hierarchy everywhere. It's absolutely fundamental to an organization, and it is based on qualities and knowledge. It is not based on anything else. So if the soul is, as there are three types of souls, as we know, it is Satvika, Rajasa, and Tamasa. So if the Satvika souls are the noble souls, the Rajasa are mixed. They have certain positives, they have certain negatives. And Tamasa Jivis are people who have only negative qualities in them. So all these three souls exist in this world. And the hierarchy is based on the qualities and the knowledge. So Jivottama, the highest soul, the highest person among the soul is Shivayu, and the person, the lowest soul is none other than Kali. And everybody, all of us exist in this broad spectrum in terms of the hierarchy. So there is Nichocha Bhamgata. I think a classic story. Look at Duryodhana and look at Vidura. Duryodhana is born as a Kshatriya, as a warrior, whereas Vidura is born as a Shudra. But in the entire Mahabharata, there is something called Vidura Niti. There is nothing like Duryodhana Niti. Why? Because his lessons were so fantastic and so profound that he could advise the kings at the highest level. And even to this day, Vidura Niti is a separate topic which it gets called out in the Mahabharata as a philosophical scriptural highlight. So therefore, in the hierarchy, what counts are the qualities and the knowledge and the true knowledge that we have. So if we have to, if they, if how do we make out whether a soul is sattvika, rajasa, or tamasic is by the fact about his qualities. It's common knowledge. We all say this. Oh my God, that person is such a nice person. That's his basic nature. Oh my God, that person always thinks negatively. You know what? That's his nature. And it's very common. People look at negatives in the most positive environment. And there are people who look at positive in the most negative environment. That itself should explain the concept of Nichocha Bhavangata. Then, of course, there is one word which causes some trouble to us, which is Samaha. One of the Vishnu Sahasranams is Samaha. Samaha means equal. Someone who treats everybody equally. So he says, oh my God, how can the God treat everybody equally? That is not the meaning of Samaha. Sri Raghavendra Swamiji, in his famous Gita Vivritti, explains this beautifully, where he says, the concept of Sama means someone who doesn't give everything equally. He evaluates before giving things, in a just manner. So he's very just. When he says Samaha, it's not equal, it is just. So let us go to a classroom and there's a teacher who has to correct some answer papers, and we say she is Samaha, she's equal. So she gives equal marks to everybody. Is that acceptable? No. What we mean in that case is she is very fair. Her evaluation is not based on any bias, but it is based on the true merit of the student. So therefore, God is like that. He evaluates merit. He evaluates people. He evaluates the souls, and according to their karma, he gives them the fruits. So therefore, that's a tenet that we have to remember, which is Samaha means God is someone who is just, who makes the right evaluation, and who's very consistent in the way he evaluates. Of course, the story of the Ramayana and the Mahabharata, it's got several stories where Lord Vishnu very clearly says that blood is not thicker than water. What is important is your quality and your knowledge. And anybody who comes up with the right knowledge is someone whom God truly appreciates and inspires. So with that, let us move to the sixth tenet. So we have another 15 minutes, and we will cover the tenets. So muktihi naija sukhano bhutihi. So here he is defined what is the meaning of bhakti, which is what is the topic of mukti, which is salvation, which is why do we say mukti and nija sukhanubhutihi? So one of the natural instincts of a human being, of any soul, is he always wants happiness. Is there anyone who's attending this session or anyone you know who does not want to be always happy? We want happiness at all times. We do not want sorrow at any points in time. Sukham eva me syat dukkham anadapi mahu. That means we don't want dukkha to come to us at all. We don't want to experience sorrow under any circumstance. It is a natural instinct for all of us. We always want to be happy. That sukha, what is that mukti? Therefore, is salvation. That is that state of absolute bliss, eternal bliss. So we all know there is a difference between happiness and bliss. There are those moments in your life when you experience bliss. For example, when you are in deep sleep and you have a very good night's rest, and you wake up, your body and mind are completely rested, or you had a very good meditation session, then you wake up in that bliss. That the happiness that you face or you experience at that point in time is of a different order. So, muktihi naija sukhanubhuti, experiencing that ultimate bliss where there's only happiness and there's absolutely no sorrow, is nothing but mukti. Why do we say mukti? Mukti means liberation from the cycle of life and death. No matter how happy we are here in this world, we have to recognize the fact that this world itself is a temporary world. There is no point in looking for permanence in a temporary world. No matter how permanent the the world is, we have to leave this world sometime or the other. The world itself will evolve. When you enter an aircraft, you're traveling from the United States to India, and you are sitting in an Emirates business class seat. You're so proud. Oh my God, I'm sitting in such a comfortable place. And you're getting pampered, a lot of food and drinks and so on. So you're sitting there, and then you're comfortably settled. But when the flight lands in Dubai, you have to give up that seat. No matter how much you're paid, that seat does not belong to you. You have to leave that place and go. Our world, our life is like that. No matter what we have achieved in this world, what may be our professional credentials, what we might have achieved on a materialistic front, they are all temporary. The bliss, the ultimate happiness exists somewhere. As Purandara says in his characteristic style, Alliruvudu namma mane, illige bande summane. That means my house is elsewhere. I have come here just like that. So what does it mean? Our abode is different. Our abode is the Vaikuntha. We have just come here into this world. Let us make the best of this world. Let us give back the best to this world. And let us all seek the ultimate source of happiness, which is mukti. The concept of salvation is liberation. Bhima and Duryodhana. So why there is another definition of mukti. Mukti means salvation from this world. So after the salvation, where do we go? Where we go is dependent on the nature of our soul. We looked at that. Jiva Ganaha, Hare Ranucharaha. So that means they're all different. And based on that difference, then the final destination also changes. Bhima went to salvation. Duryodhana also went to salvation. He said, oh my God, both of them got the same thing. The answer is no. Bhima's salvation was to go to the Vaikuntha Loka, whereas Duryodhana's salvation was going to Andhantamas. Right? The Vaishuti says this. Tattvagyan Mukti Bhajaha. Sukaisi Guru Yogyata Taratamya. Dadhachare Vishwabuddhin Sridevane Bhu Gocharan Vityabadhan Tamis Randhadikaki Tamasi Subhanam Dukhandi Sithadnan Vishnoradhavritam Shutiha Chitharmina Charidakarana Yamaha. So what it basically says is that your Tattvajnana, your knowledge is the measure of the nature of your soul. So based on the nature of your soul, you will get different end results. And the ultimate result, whatever is the ultimate result is mukti. And naija sukhanubhuti, whatever you experience as the ultimate bliss is nothing but the mukti for the satvika jivas. Which brings us to the next study, which is Amala Bhaktishta Tat Sadhana. You just described, what is the concept of mukti. So what is the phala, or what is the result of that, and how do you get there? What is the path? Is Amala Bhaktishta Tat Sadhana. That is the path to reach salvation. Which is what? Which is Amala Bhakti. Why did they say Bhakti? Amala means absolute pure. And bhakti, we will come to that in a definition in a minute. Amala bhakti is the tat sadhana. That is the effort that you have to do it. So some of the myths that we have about bhakti is that it's full of emotions. So if you get very emotional, we believe that is bhakti. So other thing we say, look, if you have bhakti, you should not ask questions. If you have devotion, just bend your head down and do what is told. That is also a myth. Unknown, therefore profound. We don't know anything about God, so therefore he must be profound. That's the other myth. We do this just as a tool to get things. We need something. Just pray to God and he will give you what you want. It's almost like an ATM. God is like a transaction. You feel bad, you perform some poma, and then you will get what you want. That's the other myth. And there is also a feeling, maybe people who have all this bhakti and all of that have a state of mind which is essentially weak. They're not strong-willed. If they're strong-willed, we don't need God. And it's a quick fix to all our problems. Just do something, just get some puja done and then we are good. All these are myths about bhakti. The way Madhvacharya defines it is very, very unique. He says, Mahatmya Jnana Purvastu Sarvatodikaha Snehaha Bhaktiriti Proktaha Muktir Chanyatha. So what does he say? Mahatmya Jnana Purvasya. So let us move to the next slide, which actually has more definitions of bhakti. Yeah. So Mahatmya Jnana Purvastu Sudradaha Sarvatodikaha Sneheti Bhaktiriti Proktaha Tatha Muktir Chanyatha. Mahabharata Tatparya Nirnaya gives this beautiful definition. As I said, Madhva Shastra is very, very clear on what it means. And of course, Jaitirtharu expands it beautifully, says, Parameshwara Bhaktar Nama, Niravadika, Ananta, Anavadya, Kalyana Gudagatva, Gnana Purvastu, right? That's why it under Samasta Vastubhyo, Ananta Gunodhikaha, Antaraya Sahasrenapi, Apratibadha, Nirantara Prema Pravaha. What a beautiful definition. It says bhakti is something that when you are looking at bhakti, it has to have Mahatmya Jnana Purvastu. That means before we actually pray. So bhakti is not emotional. Bhakti is not dependent, is not something which is blind. And you can ask questions. Not only you can ask questions, you can ask a lot of questions. Our entire shastra, scriptures start and end with questions. So somebody is asking that question and others are answering that question. So this is the definition of bhakti which is given by Madhva philosophy. And again, we all know the Vayustuti, and one of the shlokas says, Matar me matarishwan, Pitaratologoro, Bhratarishtapta Baddo, Swamin Sarvantaratman, Ajara Jaraitar Janmamrityamayana. You have prayed to Lord Vayu all along in this shloka. But what is the phala, or what is the result that we want? Govinde Dehi Bhakti. Please give me that bhakti towards Govinda or Narayana. Bhavati cha Bhagavan. Urjitam, Nirnimittam. That means I don't expect anything from it. I just expect the grace of God. Maphaleshu Kadachana. So Nirnimittam, Nirvyajam. And it's not something which is based on a give and take. And finally, Nishchanam. Something which is absolutely strong, which is not shaken by anything and any kind of distraction. That is the concept of bhakti, which forms that particular tenet, which was tenet number 7. Amala bhaktischa tat sadhanam. So this is the concept of bhakti. The Bhagavata, Ramayana, Mahabharata, all of them talk at length about the different ways this bhakti can be achieved. But only through that bhakti, Gnana Purvakavada bhakti, that we reach our goal. So it is said, Siri Nilayana Gunagala Aritu Bhaji Subode Halavidu Baldudake. That means Siri Nilayana. That means Lord Vishnu's Siri Nilaya Gunagala. We get to know his glories, his qualities, and out of amazement, the devotion and the eternal love that we have for God, which is unshakable, is Halavidu Baldudake. That means that is what we should all be targeting, and that's the result of what we want to do in life. Which brings us to the 8th tenet, which is Yakshadikritayam Pramana. As I said, Madhva philosophy has its own form and clearly defined epistemology. Why is this important? When you go to a court, and unfortunately, if you have had to go for some reason, you will get to know how arguments are made in a court. Arguments are made in a court not on the basis of the law, but the interpretation of the law. Because law is clear, but how do we interpret it is what makes the difference between one party and the other party. So therefore, the constitutional framework and the interpretation of proof is very crucial. And that is what Madhvacharya has defined it very clearly in Pramana Lakshana. And which has a commentary, which has got a Swatantra Grantha called Pramana Paddhati, when Sri Jaitirtha expanded on that and made it crystal clear about what constitutes a proof. Now, why is it important? In a court of law, for example, it is important to know what constitutes proof and what doesn't constitute proof. Electronic, video might not constitute as a proof in certain countries. So if it is not the case, then how will you show that as a proof, which is not accepted? So he defines the body of proof on epistemology called the pramanas. And there are 3 broad forms of pramanas that he talks about, which is pratyaksha. That means something that we are able to see and perceive with our senses. That is pratyaksha. Anumana means by estimation. Anumana is not Kannada. We use word Anumana to say doubt. This is not that. This is by inference. That means we look at something and we say, okay, this must be the inference. You see smoke. What's the first thing you say? Oh, there must be a fire. So that is inference. The science of inference is Anumana. And of course, Agama, which are our scriptures. So there are 3 forms of proof: Pratyaksha, Anumana, Agama. Now, all these 3 have their own place. However, there is a challenge. Today, we are trying to understand Lord Narayana, whom we can't see. Just because we can't see doesn't mean he doesn't exist. Like when right now, when all of us are sitting here, Billions of airwaves are passing all over us. There are millions of viruses and bacteria around us. There is oxygen. Can we see all of this? No. But we can perceive them. If you have a mobile phone, you can catch one of those waves. And then you say, okay, maybe all these waves are happening, are going around me. You cannot see it, but you can infer that they exist. How do you know there is air? Switch on the fan, the wind blows on you, you come to know there is air. So you infer that there must be something like this and come to a conclusion. So Anumana is very, very critical because we can't see God. And just because we can't see doesn't mean it exists. And Agamas are the scriptures. So why amongst these, the Pratyaksha has its limitations because we have our limitations, because our senses can't perceive it. There are some radars which can catch some signals. There are other radars which can't catch those signals. So that is Pratyaksha. Anumana is very, very critical. Madhvacharyas is also called Anumanacharya because he comes up with a proper science in which we can come to certain conclusions and the whole about inferences based on whatever we are seeing. And then there is Agama. But here is the real highlight of Madhva Shastra, where he says one of the ultimate proof is your Sakshi Indriya. That means we have an organ called Sakshi, which is nothing but Lord Narayana. Jivo Vinaita Sakshi. Vishnu Sahasranama says that. So that Sakshi, that conscience that is there in your mind is the ultimate proof. You ask, you've observed all the things that you've heard. You need to sit and in deep contemplation think through. Yes, I have heard Madhvacharya. I have heard other forms of philosophy. X is saying this. Y is saying this. Z is saying this. Someone else has this opinion. What is the truth? After we have studied the Shastras, we have to sit back and then contemplate. We have heard Shravana Manana Iti Dhyasa. So we have done Shravana, which is hearing, Manana, that is when you contemplate, and Iti Dhyasa means internalize this. So therefore, the ultimate proof, Madhvacharya says, is not any of this, but Sakshi. It's a very unique doctrine of Sri Madhvacharya's philosophy, which is the doctrine of Sakshi. Sri Vadaraja says, I have accepted Madhva Mata as the ultimate Mata, not, not because of my love towards Mata or my hatred of other Matas. It is based on absolute evaluation. He says in his famous Yukti Malika, Nasnehanam, Nasnehanam, Nacha Visnehanam. He says, not out of love for our Mata and not out of hatred of another Mata. Nasnehana, Nacha Visnehana. And he says, Purva Paksho, Yavan Madhva Matodayaha, Ante Siddhastu Siddhantaha, Madhvasyagama Evahi. I have evaluated every form of philosophy, and I can tell you that only Madhva Mata is the true Mata or the ultimate Siddhanta. I'm saying that with complete conviction, so much conviction that I can hold a live, snake in my hand and say that Srimad Madhvamate, the Madhvamata is the ultimate Mata, and is completely consistent with all the other forms of scripture. So, Hakshada Prakritayam Pramana. This is the beautiful science. I would really urge all of those of you who are interested to study this in detail. The Pramana Paddhati by Sri Jaitirtha, which is a beautiful expansion of Pramana Lakshana, where he clearly explains the epistemology. It is a superbly scientific, analytical text. So, if you have the time and the interest, please do read this text, which is Pramana Paddhati, which brings us to the last tenet is Akalam Naye Kavedyo Harihi. The God has different names. There are different gods, and there are all of them finally mean only one, which is Lord Narayana. So Akhilam Naye Kavedyo Hari. What it basically says is the scriptures mention different gods, but all the other gods are the servants of Sridhar. It also says, Akhilam Nayeka Vedyo Hari. When you read all the scriptures, the Vedas, the Upanishad, what comes out unequally vocally is the supremacy of Hari. So, it, something, for example, you look at Rudra Sukta. At the face of it, it looks like Rudra Sukta is a sukta which talks about Shiva. The answer is no. At the secondary level, it talks about Shiva, but the ultimate God that every letter, every word of the Vedas and the Upanishads talk about is actually Sri Hari. So therefore, why is this important? Because it is a belief that there are different scriptures and texts, and they all talk about different gods. So maybe one day this person is great, some other day somebody else becomes great. Madhvamata is very, very clear. And this is, an important tenet like the other eight is Akhilamna Ekavedyohari. She said every word, Sakala Shabda Vachyatva, he says. What is Sakala Shabda Vachyatva? It means that every word, every sound in the universe is actually talking about Shri. So if you see the wind blowing, that is talking about Sri. If you see the river flowing and the sound that the flowing river makes, that is talking about Sri. So these are the 9 tenets that summarize the Madhva philosophy. Sriman Madhvamatehe Hari Parataraha Satyam Jagat Tattvato Bhinna Jivagana Hare Ranuchara Ichocha Bhavangataha Muktir Naida Sukhanubhutihi Amala Bhaktischa Tat Sadhanam Shakshadi Kripayam Pramanam Akilam Naika Vidyo Harihi. So, in a superb, pithy manner, Sri Vyasaraja, one of the greatest commentators of Madhva philosophy and across all the philosophies, he is accepted as the ultimate guru, has summarized this in a beautiful way. As we know, Sri Vyasaraja himself is someone who has written some of the greatest texts in the Dasa Sahitya and the Vyasa Sahitya. And his summary, therefore, is something which can be considered to be the best summary of the Madhva philosophy. As I said, it's not easy. Now, here is another thing that I would like to conclude with in today's. I would like to conclude today's session with this one thing, which is when you are looking at this, there are 9 tenets. So, if you reduce one of these tenets, you will find that it becomes a little hazy. It's open to interpretation, whatever you read. But if you add one more tenet, it will be a repetition of one of the 9 tenets in some other form. So these are the 9 tenets, and these are the only 9 tenets. All the other tenets are a mix of these 9 tenets itself. So that's the first thing. And the second thing, I would like all of you to, I really request all of you to do as a kind of an ongoing exercise, is that what you should do is anything that you read in the Shastras, our scriptures, be it in the form of Sanskrit text or it's a Devanama, you will find that all those are actually fitting into one of these 9 tenets. So make this an ongoing exercise to look at these 9 tenets, wake up every day in the morning, print this out, put it on top of your laptop, so that every time you open this, you look at this shloka, it's ingrained in your memory. And also, everything that you do, start relating to this particular concept. You will realize the profoundness of this as you go on your spiritual path. I would like to thank all of you for being at today's session. It had covered a lot of ground. You might, want to go to that in greater detail later. There are a few things I wanted to cover today, but I couldn't cover because of paucity of time. And I didn't want to reduce the time that we're giving to understanding the 9 tenets, which are absolutely the cornerstones. There were some aspects which was Srimad Madhvacharya's writings, his style of writing, and so on, which we will definitely cover on the 27th of February when we have the session, which is on what is the current relevance of Madhvacharya's philosophy. It is not a philosophy which was meant for yesteryears, and it's not that it is not relevant today. In fact, it's been my own experiences, and I'd like to share some professional experiences in that session, where I can say that learning the Madhva Shastra is something which is absolutely relevant, not only now, but for the years to come. If we want to lead a successful, purposeful life and make every second count for us, understanding these tenets, understanding Sri Madhvacharya's philosophy is fantastic and it's absolutely essential. It gives us a very, very clear path. There are very few things in this world which come across with that kind of clarity and that kind of profoundness. And very importantly, that kind of authenticity that we see in Madhva Shastra. So I would like to thank all of you for being at this session and thank all the organizers and Sunil and Shrikant who have worked tirelessly to make this particular event happen. And also like to thank all the other speakers who are speaking. I know there's a wonderful lineup of great topics. I'm very keen to listen to those sessions as well. And we will try to get the summary of all of this on the 27th of February when we meet again. So till then, have a great evening and we will see you soon. Thank you so much.
So Sundar, thank you very much. That was an amazing, amazing talk. Guru Rajan uncle, do you have a question?
Yeah, namaskara. Hello, or Kantaila. Hello?
Yeah, we can hear you, uncle.
Avridara?
Yeah, Sundar is here, yeah.
Namaskara, ನನ್ನ ಹೆಸರು ಗುರುರಾಜನ್ ಅಂತ. I hope I'm asking you the question correctly. ನೀವು ಹೇಳಿದ್ರಲ್ಲ, ನೀವು ತಾಮಸಿಕ, ರಾಜಸಿಕ ಮತ್ತು ಸಾತ್ವಿಕ ಗುಣದಿಂದ ಹುಟ್ಟುತ್ತಾರೆ ಅಂತ ಹೇಳಿದ್ರಲ್ಲ, ನೀವು you were telling there are three types of gunas, people born with three types of different gunas. I was told by somebody that if somebody is born as a tamasic, the rest of his eternal life, I mean, he can stay only as tamasic. Is there a way by praying, Narayana, can they move into a next level? If not Satvika, can they become a Rajasic? That's one question. The second question I have is why some people are born as Satvika? What is it makes them be born as a Satvika and not Rajasika or Satvika gunas? And the third question I have is, you mentioned that nothing moves without Hari's permission. Without him, nothing can happen. If that is so, why some people do good things and some people do bad things? Like, murderer. Why does he murder when he is also, he has no control. He is controlled by the God, by the wish, by Bhari. Why is that? There's difference is there. I hope I was able to ask you the question right. I'm sorry if I didn't do it.
Absolutely, Mr. Gurrajan. I think you asked the right questions. I was expecting this question today in today's session. Now, whatever you heard is absolutely right. The nature of the soul does not change. It is something that is permanent. So if a soul is sattvic, he will remain sattvic. If he is rajasic, it will remain that way, and tamasic will remain that way. So why does this happen? That is the nature, right? There is no answer to why is milk white. It is its nature. So from Anadikala or from eternity, the soul existed and there is a certain nature. Now you ask me that, let us say there is a tamasic soul and he starts praying to Sri Hari. Can he become Rajasic? The very fact that he is praying to Lord Vishnu shows he is not a tamasic jivi. Because the thought of actually praying to Lord Vishnu will not come to a tamasic jivi. Very simple. Look at Duryodhana, look at Arjuna. Both of them had Vishwarupa Darshana. Look at the impact. Totally different. Duryodhana decided to fight the war, which is adharmic. Arjuna decided to fight the war, which is a dharma yuddha for him. There is so much of difference. So it is not that the world around us is any different for tamasic, rajasic, and sattvic. It is the same. It is our nature which is going to, which reflects in that manner. This is a very deep topic and it needs elaboration about why this actually happens. But to answer your question in first cut, this is what it is.
Namaskar. Thank you.
Namaskar.
Thanks, Uncle, for that question. I know we are over time, and I think I appreciate everyone staying on. I don't know if there's any other question that we want to raise now, or we can collect those questions and send it to you. Sundar, maybe there's another session we can just focus on Q&A.
Can you say like couple of words?
Yeah, please.
Sure, that's it. Thank you very much, Sundarji. When you are explaining that Panchabheda and then Satyam Jagat, all those things, it is actually pure science. It is Madhva Shastra is purely science, because what you feel, what you see is definitely real. And then again, you can classify jivas into like the things that move, like us, animals, and then cannot move, the trees. Okay. So this is purely science. And then that's what Acharya explains when someone picks argument with him, why you're questioning our belief, means he says, you're talking about belief, whereas I am talking about truth. That's what he says. And again, the same explanation, like when you were talking about Panchabhedas, I could recall one of the episodes in the movie Madhvacharya. So Narahari Tirtha, in his Purvashrama, he was called Shamas Shastri. He comes to the Acharya and says, I am so and so, but I am convinced of what all you're saying, but I still have one doubt in my mind. So then Acharya asks him, okay, go ahead. He never gets mad. The beauty of Acharya is anyone can ask him any type of question. He never got irritated. He had patience because he knows the truth. He knows the answers. So he never got irritated. So he welcomed, he said, Narahari Tirtha, come on, ask, what is your question? He says, if one pure water mixes with another pure water, then will it not become same? Will it not become one? So what he means like if a jiva without ajnana and then Paramatma is pure, then jiva without ajnana also becomes Paramatma, then both of them become same. That's what that's law. So he just used an analogy. Narahari Tirtha was asking him the question, and then Acharya smiles. Your question is so simple that I can answer. So the answer is also simple. He takes a glass of water, and there is another water in a bowl. So this is pure water, this is pure water, right? So I am mixing them. If they are really becoming one, why should the volume increase? This is. The volume is increasing means they are not becoming one. That means Jiva and Paramatma cannot become one. They are two different things.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely.
So this is very, very enthralling and then very informative. We thank you very much, Sundarji. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much.
Yep.
ಸುಂದರ್ ಅವರೇ ತುಂಬಾ ಚೆನ್ನಾಗಿತ್ತು. 2 ದಿವಸದಿಂದ ಟೈಮ್ ಹೋಗಿದ್ದೆ ಗೊತ್ತಾಗ್ಲಿಲ್ಲ. ಐ ವಿಶ್ ವಿ ಕುಡ್ ಸ್ಪೆಂಡ್ ಮೋರ್ ಟೈಮ್. ನಿಮ್ಗೆ ದ್ವಾಸಿ ಪಾಲನೆಗೂ ನಾವು ಲೇಟ್ ಮಾಡ್ತಾ ಇದೀವಿ ಅನ್ಸುತ್ತೆ. ಬಟ್ ಎನಿವೇ ಹೋಪ್ ಟು hear more of your lectures.
The food of knowledge is many day more gratifying than the other food that we have. So
doubt illa.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you, Sundar. Yep. Thank you, everyone.
Namaskara.